The Sony Fx3 is an amazing camera with one pretty major flaw. In this video, we're going to show you how we get rid of this and instead build this custom mount that allows you to put your own monitor and your own mic that actually fits on top of the camera, all for about $10 and a few hours in the garage. So the Sony Fx3 is a great camera, and I don't want to make anybody mad because I'm about to complain about their favorite brand. We know you fanboys are out there. One of the biggest issues is this mic mount they put on the top. The mic mount doesn't allow you to use your own mics. One of the things we found right off the bat, this is a Rode NTG. If you slide it in here, it doesn't lock. It does not fit at all. So you end up having to use duct tape, which unfortunately we've been getting to know really well on this channel. And wrapping this in duct tape also just makes it kind of cheap and clunky. So I figured if we're gonna do that, we might as well just build our own mount for a microphone. If you try to mount on the back of the camera, you end up getting in the way of your hand. The same goes with trying to mount a monitor. Anytime you wanna put a monitor on this top handle and the only two screws they provided, you're going to end up actually being in the way of your hands when you're trying to use the top handle. Top handles are great, but not when you can't get your hand in there, especially once you've added the battery and the cables and everything else. Not to mention, the mic is going to hit unless you're way up here. So there are a lot of issues with this, and in this video, we are going to resolve this right now. As far as I'm aware, no one makes anything like this. There are some cages coming out for the Sony Fx3, one of which we're going to be reviewing very soon. So let's go ahead and show you how we built that custom mount and what we had to do it. The only tools we're going to use in this video are a small screwdriver, a grinder or cutoff wheel, which you could use a hacksaw if you have one, or you could just use a piece of flat stock metal instead of this angle, which doesn't need cut. And you will need a drill of some type. This one's pretty ragged out, but it still does the job. The first thing we're going to need to do is take this top part off. When we open up the mic mount, we're going to see two screws inside. Those two screws come right out with a very small, almost jewelry type Phillips screwdriver. And this piece pulls right off. This thing is a neat idea, but it creates way too much handling noise with the camera, and it has a little bit of this weird sticky sound to it whenever the microphone moves around. So this thing is essentially useless, but don't lose the screws. The next thing we need is an L bracket or any type of flat stock metal that's about 1/8 inch thick. Ideally powder coated. You will have to touch up the paint after this is over with, but you won't want to have to paint the whole thing. So just be a couple little spots you'll need to touch up. And if a little paint comes off, it won't really show. And it turns out it's 1.5 inches wide by about 3 to 3¼ inches the other direction. So we lay this inside and we realize we need to bend this flat so that it fits. I'll show you the final piece and then we'll get into how we actually made this piece. What we're trying to accomplish is this. This piece simply has two holes drilled that are actually the same size as the factory Sony screws, and then an extra hole to mount a cheese plate to. So after we bent this, cut it, drilled it, and painted it, it's going to fit on here like so. And then we're going to also use, and I know what you're going to say, we're going to use a zip tie, a very heavy duty one, around this back edge to lock it down. The two screws would probably hold it just fine, but the issue I would have is if you get too much torque, it could potentially break those screws off, especially if you get too much weight over here. So we definitely want to have something pinning this down just to ensure that we don't create any damage or mess up this top handle, because I believe it's probably going to be about $600 or $700 when it even becomes available as a separate part. So to achieve this plate, the very first thing we're going to need to do is take our L bracket, which I will link down below. We got this from Menards for about $4. We're going to want to take the end and bend it. It works out that the bend point is right about the center of the slotted hole, which weakens the metal and makes it very easy. So I'm just going to put this into a clamp, throw a little bit of duct tape on the ends or gaff tape or whatever you have, and then just hit it with a hammer a few times until it bends to an angle that looks about right. This isn't very scientific. Once we've completed that, we'll want to take the grinder or some type of hacksaw or chop saw and cut off this top edge. I leave a little lip there so that when you put the zip tie around the actual camera, it will hold without slipping off and the zip tie will stay in place. And that's why we used an L bracket to begin with, because it's just easier to start with that little bit of a bend there. Now that we've accomplished this, we're going to pin it down with a screw so that it doesn't shake or move around. And then we're going to drill the holes that are necessary. I actually used the top half of the microphone holder, the original one, to show where the holes should go on this plate, and then drilled those holes. Just use whatever bits you can find that are larger than the thread, smaller than the head of the screw. Pretty basic stuff. After that, you'll need to drill your 1/4 inch hole or a little larger in the bottom, or whatever is necessary to fit your cheese plate. I'll link the cheese plate we're using. This is just a little bar. It was $10 on Amazon. But you can use any cheese plate for this. It doesn't make any difference at all as long as it just fits in this general area. Once we've completed this, we're going to want to test fit it and make sure that the screws line up and we're happy with the result. Now, we're not completely finished yet. After we test fit it, we're going to want to sand off those edges, clean it up a little bit so you don't have any sharp edges or burrs. Try to make it look as good as possible, and then go out and throw a coat or two of paint on it. We just use a Rust-Oleum matte black, but you can use whatever you'd like. Ideally, it matches the powder coating of the part you started with, so that if a little paint chips off, it doesn't show. Now that we've finished customizing our part, we're going to go ahead and start the assembly process. This is actually pretty straightforward. The very first thing we're going to want to do is not attach it to here, but we're actually going to want to mount the cheese plate first. So we'll take our cheese plate, just show how it's going to fit on top, and make sure we leave enough room for the zip tie. Yes, we're using a zip tie. And then we'll want to attach the screws in the bottom. So I have these stainless steel 1/4-20 tapered screws that I picked up at our local hardware store. I believe they're about 50 cents a piece. Okay, now we have the cheese plate mounted on top, and we'll set this on here and then add the original screws that came with the camera. Now, if you mess these screws up or lose these tiny, tiny little screws, you can buy new ones. They're 2.5 millimeter by, I believe, about 1/2 inch. You can buy 3/4 inch if you need it and use washers, but they are 2.5 millimeter screws. So let's go ahead and put these in. Now that we've ran the screws in through the top, we're going to need to attach this so that it doesn't rock over. One of the big issues you're going to have is you have a lot of leverage right here, and that leverage could theoretically break these little screws off. Not something I want to risk with a camera that's $5,000 or with any expensive monitor or microphone system that you'll have on top of this. So for us, we had to resort to zip ties. There are other options. You could use a double-sided 3M under here, and it would probably work just as well, but I don't trust it quite as much, and it's going to leave adhesive on your camera that you have to clean off later if you want to take this off. This could just be snipped off, and then a couple screws could deal with this. So let's go ahead and put the zip tie on. I found you want to face the zip tie down like this so that when you hook it up, it doesn't look quite as cumbersome or cheap, honestly. It looks a little better, I think, than any other direction I've found. We'll pull this on, and you want the edge of the zip tie to be on one of the corners always. And get it good and tight. Like, not to the point that you're going to crack the plastic, but you definitely want this very, very tight. And once you're satisfied with that, you'll just cut the end off. A small pair of snips should do the job. And now you have a fully mounted setup with a cheese plate that is attached using 2 screws into the factory holes and this extra heavy duty zip tie, which again, I'll link below. It was like $3 for the pack. I know this isn't the most elegant solution, but this works really, really well for our purposes. So yeah, let's go ahead and put the mic on, the monitor, and see what it looks like when we're done. I like using the 15 millimeter rod because the 15 millimeter rod allows us to adjust the mic very easily and gives us more options later on if we want them. So we'll put this on, get our microphone. HDMI cable, and of course a battery we'll need to put on the back of the monitor. But this is the final setup. Your hand is now completely free to move around. You don't have anything to worry about. You don't have all that noise, that handling noise that you used to have. And this is quiet. It doesn't make a ton of noise when you move around. This provides so much more freedom for us, and we felt like this was a better solution. Plus, when you're filming in a corner and you're up close to the camera, you can see the monitor. You're not trying to look at the little flippy screen that, by the way, kind of gets in the way with the HDMI cable and headphones and anything else you're using. So for this was the best solution we could come up with. I'm sure there will be better ones out there in the future, but as of right now, the FX3 is still very new, and those solutions haven't arrived yet. We are going to be getting a cage for this camera very soon. As soon as that arrives, we're going to make a review video about that cage and maybe see if we can find some more elegant solutions. In the meantime, if you guys want to do this, check out the links below for the hardware we used, and I'll give a little bit of a description for the specific tools we used as well in the description of this video. If no one makes a usable solution for this, we may actually end up 3D printing these, in which case we will sell the parts or just give you the 3D print files. Those will be added in the description below once we get our printer in, which is a few weeks down the road. I appreciate you sticking out this entire video, and I hope this was actually helpful to you. I know this isn't the most elegant solution, especially considering we used a zip tie, or we could have used this 3M to assist holding this on properly and to keep it from breaking in the future. But if you guys have a better idea, we would love to hear about it in the comments below, or if you see someone come up with a permanent solution that is manufactured on a mass scale, we'd love to hear about that too. Again, thank you guys. If this video was helpful, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel if you're into this kind of thing. We'll see you in the next one.
They really don't think we can keep doing this. They don't think we can keep making hits about cameras. But I'm the cameraman. But I'm the cameraman. Stay creamy.
Yeah, I started on a 50 mil lens. Now I'm about to bag 50 mil yen. I can shoot all day, I got stamina. Turtleneck on with my camera.